Thank you, Linda, and thank you all for being here and for putting up with my toying with a mic. So the idea for this exhibition, as Linda alluded to, originated with a conversation with a different kind of passionate collector, a fellow who grew up in Salem, who learned about art through this museum, had a passion for marine painting. And I was having a great conversation about what I usually do, 19th century marine painting, and he said, I think I know somebody you need to meet. So you might be thinking that The Life of a Curator is one very akin to the life of a rock star, but it was only in that moment that they actually intersected. So that all worked out just incredibly well, because we were looking specifically for the sort of exhibition, the sort of material that provided unexpected encounters with art, unexpected emotional responses to art, and things that people don't necessarily expect to even see in a museum. And to the extent that Kirk was looking for greater recognition for the artists who are represented in his collection, it is the perfect intersection for us. So I was very, very fortunate to get to know the very generous, gracious, and unflaggingly enthusiastic collector known as Kirk Hammett for the exhibition we are celebrating today. So, in their heyday, movie studios didn't think of these posters as works of art. They thought of them as promotional pieces that had a use life, and when that film was no longer out there, they didn't care really what happened to them, so they were printed up in the thousands. But in many cases, you'll wander through and see examples where there is a handful, even fewer, sometimes only one surviving example of a poster, which had to have been printed up in untold numbers. And no one really paid very much attention to these until just a couple of decades ago, when I think Kirk was well into it, well ahead of the curve, collecting these things, when others unfortunately got involved, and it's become a very competitive world. But he was a visionary in that regard, and was very early on to recognize some of the artists. Unfortunately, most of these artists, of course, are unidentified today. We don't have names. They weren't allowed to sign their works. So in addition to the posters, there's also original art by the likes of Frank Frazetta and Basil Gogos, dating back to the 60s, when Dracula met the Wolfman on the cover of Creepy Magazine, that sort of thing. But I think, in the course of this project, it came to me as sort of a crashing realization. As somewhat of an art historian, when I realized that working with this material was working with images that people on the streets of Salem and beyond would recognize long before they might even recognize a painting by Winslow Homer or Fitzhenry Lane. This is the stuff that has very deep emotional appeal, unforgettable kinds of images. And so you actually recognize quite a few of these images, even though maybe you haven't seen them since the last few decades or whatnot. And so, for Kirk, that relationship with this kind of art and these works is very dynamic, and those sort of Gothic sensibilities that you see coming through in all of this is clearly represented in his music. And so this is a show about graphic art. It's a show about the sort of social influences, what scared people at different moments in time over the course of the 20th century, and how that material has been incredibly effective in inspiring a great musician to draw the excitement from one media in art and apply it to his own creative output. And so without further ado, I'm going to turn the podium over to the man you really want to hear from, and then we will walk through the galleries together. We will go into the galleries, and I think Kirk will be able to stay with us for a little bit of time and answer just a couple of questions, and then we'll continue to wander through together as well.
Hello, everyone. Okay, so first and foremost, I just wanted to say thank you to Dan Fenimore and everyone at the Peabody Museum for making this incredible event possible. And we are so grateful, my wife and I, to be able to have this here right now. And it's just amazing how much gratitude and how thankful I feel about this opportunity to share all this with everyone who's interested. And I also want to take the time to say that This stuff has informed my music ever since I started playing guitar. It's just one of those things. It's a similar feeling that I get when I play guitar, when I watch horror movies. And if you want the proof is in the accompanying piece that my wife and I wrote called "The Maiden and the Monster," which is played at the end of the show. And one last thing, I just wanted to dedicate all of this to all the unsung, unknown artists who put together all those incredibly beautiful movie posters. And to this day, we still don't know who those artists are. We maybe know maybe 2 or 3 of them. There could have been hundreds of them, but you know, I'd like to dedicate this show to all those unsung artists who will probably never be identified. I mean, this is for them, really, because without them, who can even be here? It's a lie, definitely.
I think we can start right here. I'm going to do a bit of a walkthrough and point out some of the interesting pieces in the front. And Kirk will stay with us for the beginning, but then we have other plans for him, so he's going to be whisked off a little bit later. But as I mentioned inside, this show is very much oriented towards looking at some of the great graphic arts and artists of the 20th century. Unsung people, as Kirk mentioned, but some of the most influential and effective and emotionally laden graphic art of the era. It's a spectacular discovery in its way for myself to realize that such amazing work, such incredibly effective lithography has essentially gone unrecognized for so long. And, you know, as I mentioned, so many of these things were so well distributed in their day and then essentially disappeared. They really did focus on the social import of the times. What were people afraid of? What was going on culturally that drew people's attention and that drew their anxieties? I think we can all relate to what might be going on today and what somebody might create a horror film about today. Well, those kinds of fears were just as salient, and they came through very, very strongly in posters in those days. And then, of course, the element that ties all of this so well together for an exhibition here at the Peabody Essex Museum is that kind of emotional and scientific measurable study of how someone can utilize this material, the excitement aspect of it, to inspire creativity in another artistic genre. But I just think it's very important to stop and look at a poster like this. It's not what people are really expecting to see when they talk about movie posters. This thing is huge. Right? It's a 3-sheet poster for Frankenstein, released in 1931. And I believe, you'll correct me if I'm wrong, that it is the only surviving known example of this poster, which must have been produced in the thousands at the time. But you can well imagine, a poster this size would have been glued to a wall, or would have been considered too inconvenient to take down, or just wouldn't have survived in any other location. It's a very special story how this poster survived in a disused movie theater projection booth that had been moved to another space. We can step on in here past the Zapatron, and I'll ask Kirk maybe to talk about one of my favorite posters in the entire exhibition.
Yes, this is the Mummy poster, obviously, and this poster was made in 1932, or the movie was made in 1932. This is the only one known to exist. It's, again, like the Frankenstein poster, it's a 3-sheet poster consisting of 3 parts put together. And this poster was found in Scandinavia. It was actually found in Sweden, of all places. An American 3-sheet in Sweden. How it got there, I don't know, because there are other examples of Scandinavian movie posters in the exhibit. But somehow this made it to Sweden in 1930, in the early 30s, and that in itself is kind of like mind-boggling for me on how it got there. This is an excellent example, I think, of the relationship at the time between horror and the most popular aspects of modern cinema then. Back then, some of the most popular movies were romance movies, or movies that centered around some sort of like love interest, love sort of triangle, whatever. And so what the movie studios would do is they would try to bring in the romantic aspects of the movie into the movie poster as a marketing tool. It was marketed as a horror film, but it was also marketed as somewhat of a romance. And there is a romantic subplot, but it really is based. What I see from this poster is it's all about burning desire. Because if you know the movie, the mummy falls in love with this woman, and everything comes to life in the wake of that, and you have this image of burning flames coming out of the mummy, which to me denotes a burning desire. And I think that's what the intention the graphic artist had, and I really think that they did a really good job of putting that message across.
So I think that this poster is particularly interesting because in the 30s, most art historians, of course, were going in the direction, and most mainstream art was looking towards modernism and abstraction. There actually are elements that one could point to in this poster that fit that model, but really the narrative is in realism. You show those faces, you show those features, and they're giving you the emotional impact of that film, all distilled in one particular sheet.
I mean, if you look at their faces, it says a lot. It shows concern, bewilderment, maybe some sort of attraction, and he's definitely has a look where he feels he's threatened.
Yeah, how's he going to keep his spot?
He's not happy.
Yeah, not happy. And it's interesting because you don't see a lot of this in modern movie posters these days. That kind of facial expression being put across in an illustrated way. It's true. You just don't see that anymore. Usually people just rely on pictures now. So,
Floating heads.
or floating heads.
Yeah.
Maybe we should take a look at some Frankenstein stuff.
Yeah, good idea.
So I happen to know this is one of Kirk's favorites, and this poster is very interesting because we talk about 1 sheet and 3 sheet, the American formats for posters, but there's actually some kind of range for them. This is a 4-sheet grand. It's a European poster.
Yeah, the term would be a French double blonde. And the movie posters that came out of Europe, that were produced in Europe, were very different from the posters that were coming out of America in that the posters from Europe were usually signed. And this guy, Roland Coudon, he was actually a very famous artist, graphic artist in France. And he did a lot of illustrative sort of posters, advertising products, but he also did movie posters. And this is a fine example of his movie poster work. And what I really love about this poster is the atmosphere that it creates. As you'll see, black, white, gray, and tan. You can't get more gloomy than those colors put together as a scene in the opening of the movie. This is a scene that's like in the first 2 or 3 minutes. It's one of the best scenes in the movie. I love how they literally took it out and just put it on the poster with a very idealized sort of interpretation of the Frankenstein monster. What I mean by idealized is, look how he looks kind of robotic or  He has these like weird cuffs, and on the other posters, you'll see his feet, his shoes are actually made of metal. So, I mean, he wasn't really seen as like maybe an undead person or a zombie or whatever. He was seen more so as a machine that's been put together with disparate parts. And that's very interesting because I always saw him as just, you know, a monster, something that was anything but robotic. And so that's very interesting because when I think about it, I think about 1931, and at that time, there was a lot of scientific innovation going on, and there was a lot of like looking toward the future, and there were a lot of films like Metropolis or Things to Come where people were projecting how it might be in the future, and I think some of that thinking kind of like spilled over to this ad campaign. Because, you know, that sort of thinking was very prevalent in the late 20s, early 30s, when the Depression was going on, and, you know, people were just wanting some hope for a better future. And so you got these very idealized sort of images coming through in a lot of the posters. And this is one of them right here. This is like the Frankenstein monster as more of a futuristic robot than parts of dead bodies put together.
So we're conscious of time. We're going to go and take a quick look at the Dracula and answer a couple questions.
Okay. Dracula.
I like this one because it shows such a broad range of emotions about Dracula and the different kinds of lettering, the different kinds of experiences. I mean, I think that guy's pretty cool, not the least of which being he's leaping off of a boat, so this really is a maritime show. But, you know, here we are in the 1930s, and here's a Transylvanian count who's threatening this poor guy. You know he doesn't stand a chance. Look at that guy, right? But people in the 30s who were afraid of immigration and what was, you know, had been happening, Central European immigration, and so this was a very comprehensible kind of image to a lot of people. Whereas here we have the story of the strangest passion the world has yet known. That's a very different kind of message. I love that sort of dreamy quality to it.
Yeah. And in a time when people didn't know about subliminal advertising or anything, you know, the look of these eyes is questionable. You know, they look like a different part of anatomy other than eyes. And, you know, it's an interesting aspect of this poster, and I wonder, was that intentional or unintentional? Was that conscious or unconscious? I don't know. But, you know, I kind of like, I can't help but bring attention to that aspect.
So if we...
Sorry.
Well, maybe we can start with a question.
Hi, I'm Chris with Radio of Horror. Love your collection.
I love your tie.
Thank you very much. What is a piece you have not been able to obtain that's your holy grail?
Oh, can I just break in there? I don't think you need to answer that question.
Well, the piece that I'm looking forward to obtaining the most is the next major discovery, the next major movie poster finding. And the last major movie poster finding was that Frankenstein Creature. That was a major finding. That poster is the only one known to exist, like Dan said, and it was found in an old abandoned projection booth that no one had been in for like 60 or 70 years.
Wow.
So something could be found like tomorrow, and I could find out about it the next day, and it could be like the most amazing piece that I didn't expect to even survive.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the case with most of these posters.
Kirk, what's the first poster you ever bought, and what's the most recent one you bought?
Well, the Gorgon was the very first movie poster I bought. It was a horror film from the 60s, and I still have it on that poster. The last poster I bought was an insert from Metropolis, and that was literally like 2 weeks ago.
Wow.
And I wanted to put it in the exhibit, but that would have caused major chaos. So next time.
Museums don't handle chaos very well. One more question.
As you probably well know, Karloff is not credited in the movie as Frankenstein's monster.
Well, he's credited as
With a question mark.
a question mark. Yeah.
We see his name on these posters. Do you know if they're after the movie became somewhat successful, or
Well,
how's that?
well, you have to remember that that role made him a star. It put his name in kitchens all over the world. So, yes, he did get billing on the movie posters. But that's because no one knew who he was, basically. And in the movie, it says the monster as question mark. The question mark is because no one knew who he was, really. See, it was supposed to go to Bela Lugosi as I don't know, as you guys know, but as I know, it was supposed to go to Bela Lugosi, but Bela Lugosi didn't want to be under tons of makeup and virtually unrecognizable. So he passed, and Boris Karloff, as a studio unknown, but having the look, was hired on to replace Bela Lugosi, and then the rest is history.
So we're going to let Kirk go now, and I'm going to continue to walk you through the show and point out some of the great things. And I would point out the difference between 1931, Frankenstein, where Karloff's name is this big, and 1932, where his name appears above the title of the film itself. Skyrocketed in 1 year. I find that just a fantastic little moment. You know, and as a curator, those are the things I look for to make the point when you walk through the galleries and say, look at how much impact this film had on the Renaissance.
So thank you, Kirk, so much for joining us.
His inspiration from horror posters, and some of his original art that you have on the wall on the inside there. And I encourage you all to come back and take a look at it on your own. It's very hard to. So why don't we get into this section? This really was drawing on some of the best people and best researchers. So clearly this is an example of a shift in ideas and attitudes about what was scary. The sci-fi element was really coming to the fore after World War II, the atomic bomb explosion. Everyone was concerned about aliens from outer space. They believed suddenly they had a better understanding about the universe, atomic power. People claimed that the explosion of the bomb attracted aliens to the fact that there was life on Earth. And so there was no discussion, essentially no discussion of UFOs before World War II. After World War II, look around. And if the threats weren't coming from outer space, the threats were coming from beneath the sea. Essentially, zones where people shouldn't go. When humans dabble where they shouldn't be, this is what happens. And it isn't the creature from the Black Lagoon's fault that he was lured by this woman who was swimming in his village. From there. So the show itself, of course, is based primarily in the great sort of universal posters of the 1930s, but we do reach well beyond, and we're trying to, of course, make sure that the subject is relevant to audiences of different ages and who are fans of different types of films. In a graphic arts standpoint, the poster from The Alien, which is the latest poster in the show from 1979, is a very, very famous poster for graphics. A very successful poster for graphic arts people. And so, and it's green color, which surprisingly enough, you'd think that these artists would have worked with lots of red, blood colors, but really they all work.
Okay guys, that's Dr. Chris from Radio of Horror signing off. I hope you enjoyed the video tour. You have to come out to the Peabody Essex Museum or check out It's Alive, the Kirk Hammett Horror Collection, to find out where it's going to be at your local city as well. Hope you enjoyed the video. Check out the rest of the videos here we have here at Radio of Horror. Like, subscribe, and comment if you can.